Welcome to our seventh episode, our 11th recording, but our seventh episode. We're going to try to do the topic of religion meets politics. So the two things you're not supposed to talk about at the dinner table.
Well, that and the weather.
Yeah, well, that's sort of the go-to topic if you have nothing to talk about.
Global warming?
Yeah,
You're not
okay.
supposed to talk about that either.
Well, you see, we tried 3 times, was it, to do a podcast episode on religion? Or was it just 2?
Oh, it was a whole bunch of times. And for the most part, I think that it was... I liked it. I thought they were great.
They're unreleasable. I got really mad. I got really, really mad. And
Ironically, not at religion, just in general, at
no.
life, right?
No, it had to do with subject matter. And,
okay.
yeah, we decided not to release those ones. So we're going to try to do religion, not just religion, but the political aspect of it. We're in Canada, so it's a bit of a different situation than, our friends down south. They have to deal with a whole lot of other, a whole different, echelon of bullshit than we do in terms of how religion plays out in politics. But, we have our own set of problems here.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it is different. I mean, you take a guy like Stockwell Day, who is our equivalent of their, what's her name from Alaska? Sarah Palin.
Yeah,
right? Except in his case, he gets laughed off the stage. No one respects him at all in the media whatsoever. And he's kind of just this necessary, weight around the neck of the Conservative Party. All he ever does is say something really stupid occasionally, and then they kind of just have to go, it's not representative of the party as a whole, I guess.
Well, all they ever did, he's retired now.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was my MP actually for my entire growing up life.
Yeah, well, he was the leader of a sort of major political party that didn't actually go anywhere, but became part of the beginning nucleus of the Conservative Party, which we have now, which is led by Stephen Harper. And he apparently is a guy who has strong, sincere, and foundational religious beliefs. Although you wouldn't know it from his political life, it seems he's sort of jettisoned all that in order to sort of maintain power.
That seems to be more important to him than his supposedly deeply held religious beliefs.
I guess that's the major difference between Canadian politics and American ones, is that we have politicians who are willing to be hypocrites when it comes to religion, and they have politicians who are willing to be hypocrites when it comes to politics.
That's a good way to put it. I don't know, Canada does have a small amount, a sizable minority of very religious people that you could directly compare to the Baptist Christians in the United States. We have Baptists too, and they have a lot of the same views, but generally Canadians don't seem to really fall under. We're not culturally, we're becoming more secular.
Well, I think it's a problem because the whole fundamentalist religion Christianity thing, because we're basically going to be talking about Canada and the United States. And so we're basically going to be talking about Christianity.
Yeah.
The problem is that fundamentalist Christianity has been so heavily identified with American culture that you kind of seem as something of a traitor to Canada if you are kowtowing to fundamentalist religion. That's something Americans do. That's not something Canadians do.
Unless you're in Alberta or the Okanagan.
Yeah, but even then, it's kind of you have to be able to find a way to make it make sense for the rest of the country, which you can't really do just by saying, well, God and Jesus and the Bible.
Yeah, well...
And everyone else will go, yeah, and then what? You gotta give me more than that.
Well, I think one of the reasons why Stephen Harper has muzzled all of his MPs and the Conservative Party members from talking to the media at all is precisely because of this reason, and a whole lot of other things, but I think mostly just the fact that they tend to say really religiously motivated things, preaching moral values that most Canadians just do not agree with.
Yeah.
And so he's just okay, guys, just stop talking, don't say anything to the media, and we'll be fine.
I think I think he, with not the last Alberta election, but the one before that, where the Wild Rose Party basically imploded, I think primarily because of that nonsense, where they had like a bunch of like religious whack jobs who had been put into constituency associations all throughout the province, and like they were just saying completely insane things all the time, and then eventually the Wild Rose Party got associated with those ideas, and then they kind of just imploded.
Yeah.
And so I guess maybe the Conservatives are thinking, we don't want to do that. We don't want we don't want the party to be hurt for the sake of the sincere beliefs of the people in it.
In the back end of things, though, the Christian groups and like colleges and stuff and like religious organizations have become more closely aligned with the federal government because
but
not overtly,
the public
but covertly.
is moving in the opposite direction, and I really think that all of this is going to be just they're going to the religious right in Canada is just going to suddenly wake up when they've lost political power and find that they have nothing.
Yeah.
Like they didn't convince Canadians that their ideas are correct. They sacrificed their image for power. And then once they lose that, and at some point they will, then suddenly they're going to find themselves with nothing. Then they're going to probably be rightly labeled as hypocrites.
Yeah.
At that point.
And then they'll probably split into two separate parties again.
Maybe.
If we're lucky.
Or there'll be like some new movement within the right wing of the country and like our leaders betrayed us kind of stuff.
Yeah, but I mean, what I was saying before though about like religious groups becoming more aligned or closely related to the federal government. Like if you go to say Trinity College or some like Bible school, and you take like a politics class, you have a really good chance of getting paid to be a staffer for an MP in your local constituency. And there are like this whole network of religiously motivated institutions like in Ottawa that have pretty close relations with a lot of the MPs, and it's a shame for them because they can't seem to get any of their important issues passed, like banning abortion and reinstating the death penalty.
Just for anyone who's listening who wouldn't know this, the current prime minister of the country, who is the leader of the Conservative Party, which of all the parties that are electable at this point, is probably the closest aligned towards banning abortions generally and just restricting them in particular. He has specifically said he will not allow any debate whatsoever on the issue of abortion in Parliament so long as he's leader. He does not want it brought up whatsoever. Not in favor, not against. Although obviously the main issue is against because that's the distinction his party has. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, we have a pretty clear example there of the Prime Minister basically making a clear political decision at the expense of his religious supporters, who at the end of the day don't really have anywhere else to go.
Well, it's funny. They love that they have been in power for the last umpteen years, but they are consistently frustrated that the leadership of their party has constantly betrayed their values. Wait, doesn't that sound familiar?
Well, that's a lot of politics.
That's
generally.
all parties. But
I mean, well, to some degree at least.
In any event, I mean, they're pissed off because like the if you ask any Christian groups tend to focus towards those moral issues as the things that they care the most about, like abortion, gay marriage, and
what's the Conservative Party's position on gay marriage? They don't have one, right? Like these are all issues they don't want. Their position is that they don't have a position.
In this case, their position in both cases is the law. There isn't really one. There's no law on abortion and there's no law on gay marriage, except the fact that...
that's another interesting... There's no laws in Canada on abortion at all, restricting it whatsoever.
We're the only country in the world that has no law regarding it. It doesn't...
Legally, you can get an abortion at any point in the...
every of the times.
Pregnancy.
Yeah.
Technically, that you won't ever be able to get abortions late term unless there's physical harm
or
to the
medical
woman.
Whatever.
But yes, technically, we don't have any laws at all restricting it.
Yeah, and that seems to have worked out pretty well.
It's okay. I mean, we do have problems with access and all that sort of stuff, but yeah.
But that, I think, just speaks to the general ailments of the public health system and not, just unique to that. But I don't know. There's other religious issues too. Common one is creationism versus evolution being taught in schools, right? That's
Right.
the classic issue, which is not, I guess, as big of a deal because there's been a lot of court cases.
Well,
where-
court cases in the States. I mean, here we haven't. I don't know if we've ever had like a specific injunction against a teacher, even.
Oh, surely we must have.
But I can't think of one recently, at least. Like, I don't know of any. I mean, in the States, you hear about these stupid school boards and, some lower half of the education spectrum of the states deciding, oh, no, we're going to teach creationism in addition to evolution or not evolution at all, and losing some court case or just losing a bunch of money in some suit or whatever. And I don't know if we have had that happen here. I mean, I'm sure there are teachers in high schools in Canada who are creationists who will, at the very least, imply creationism throughout their, course or throughout the year. But it doesn't seem like in the case when it comes to here that there's actually like much of an effort to make a case for creationism as part of the public school system.
Well, I mean, there are, private schools, like Christian schools that exist here, and obviously they're going to be teaching that, but like within the public school spectrum, I'm surely it must have happened, but it's not really like this perpetual nuisance.
I mean, Alberta is the most religiously conservative province, right?
By far.
But what's ironic is it almost seems like, 'cause when you talk about like the Banff National Park and the whole fact that there's like one of the greatest dinosaur fossil sources in the world in Alberta, it's almost like they don't really want to denigrate this amazing find in their own province.
You mean Drumheller, not Banff.
Oh, right, sorry. Drumheller. Jesus. Anyway, in Alberta, right? Like, so they found all these fossils, and it just seems like there's a that to really go the creationist thing would undermine what is, in all other circumstances, a really major, important cultural keystone,
scientific keystone in the hunt for the truth behind evolution,
or just truth behind it, reality. Like, just like this is an amazing find. It'd be like it'd be like if someone in Alberta had been the first person to discover like Neptune. And then also there being also a movement to declare that like Neptune doesn't exist or something, and that like people in Alberta would decide no, it totally exists because it has to, because otherwise this important thing we've achieved wouldn't matter.
There's a funny thing about Drumheller and Alberta. Every year, at least once, there is a private school bus that drives up to the front of the museum, and they do the an annual tour. It's like a field trip that they take the kids on, and the whole time, like, instead of having the actual museum leaders, like or the museum staff sort of take them through and explain all the things, they have their the private Christian school teacher teaching the creationist stance on all of these fossils. Yeah. And the whole time, like, sort of berating science about, well, sure, all of these facts on these placards here say that these fossils are millions of years old, but we all know that the Earth, they couldn't possibly be more than 6,000. And so, yeah, it flies in the face of all of this. So there's definitely there's a group of people, a cultural minority, if you will, in Canada that are actively trying to do this, but
it seems like
generally
it's
speaking,
tougher sell here, really.
Well, even so, I mean, in any time when there's chaos and people are looking for answers, they are gonna grasp for something. But Canada hasn't been as chaotic as most of the world, so we've been able to maintain our secularism.
Although it is easy in this country to say start a cult and like buy some land in the middle of nowhere and never contact the rest of the world ever again.
Yeah, well, I don't know. There is a BC Supreme Court case dealing with the Mormon groups in the interior, so you can't hide forever.
It's kind of the province's big sort of, well, it's not really a dirty secret. It's more of a joke. Because like most of the people I know totally don't care about like the polygamy thing.
Yeah.
And it seems like even like the Supreme Court is kind of like, if it wasn't so fucking weird to change our laws to deal with it, we just would. But it's like really convoluted, and there's not really a clear way to even address that problem. So no, it's not real. But yeah, there is a whole town, Bountiful in British Columbia, that is like the fundamentalist branch of the fundamentalist splinter group of Mormonism that split off however many long years ago, and they practice polygamy and mass and occasionally child brides. Although they've apparently stopped doing that.
Oh, good.
After a bunch of people got arrested in the States and here in Canada and were like charged with having children as wives.
Right. Yeah. Okay. That's fair.
Yeah.
Well, I shouldn't even say this, but I worked with someone once that told me that they were from that area, and I said, "Oh, really? It seems like a nice place." It didn't bring up that issue at all about the whole polygamy thing,
But that's all anyone knows about it.
yeah, I know. It's like
literally,
the obvious thing that you think when someone brings up Bountiful.
It's just a few, it's thousands of people in the middle of the interior, well, deep interior, and it's like there's nothing else there. It's the thing that anyone would care about. It's the only reason the CBC would ever go there. It's the only reason anyone would like go there specifically to do a documentary.
I don't know. They probably have lots of sheep. If you want to do like a sheep documentary,
Yeah, on local shepherding culture and like the heritage of it and all that stuff.
CBC has lost so much of its budget that might be something that they may be reduced to someday. Who knows?
Oh, at this point, I think they'll probably just start asking people to come in and volunteer or something.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Well, let's move on. I think probably the biggest imprint that, like the most noticeable thing about religious groups being active in politics, and you see this a lot more in the United States, like we were saying before, in the Canadian situation, there's this, religion is just sort of this like open secret of the Conservative Party where, everyone knows that they're religious fundamentalists, but they don't really...
A lot of them are. I mean, not all of them.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, a lot of them, their ministers aren't and things like that. Like the higher up people.
But the backbenchers.
A lot of the backbenchers are, and I'm sure a sizable minority of the party's membership as well.
Yeah, but in any event, what I was saying, there's this Christian society, and I respect everyone's right to believe what they want, to hold whatever religion they want.
So long as you can't control their very minds, you will continue to respect their ability to think. Well, kudos to you, Ben.
Hey, it's just the disclaimer I have to say. I don't want anyone to think that I'm being a jackass.
Well, we are being jackasses.
Why else would we have this podcast?
Yeah. Think what we believe.
But there's this, because they disagree with the and I'm talking about the more there's a whole bunch, this whole spectrum of Christian groups, right? But I mean the more culturally conservative ones. They really are at odds with modern culture, right? Like the openness about sex and drug use and profanity and all that. And there's this separate sort of universe they live in where they have like Christian music, Christian sports teams, Christian events, Christian activities, and Christian family things,
Christian movies,
and then they find that, and they sort of live in this world, and then when they look at society and the stuff they see on regular public television, whatever, when they start trying to impose their own cultural restrictions on the rest of the broader society is when I start to disagree,
Yeah. I mean, even if it wasn't the issues that are usually associated with them, I mean, just the cultural stuff, like the disdain for profanity and the weird moral sort of the necessity of having a proper moral lesson to every story, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Just makes, like you say, Christian music is not very good, to put it mildly. Christian movies are generally terrible, such as the recent one with Nicolas Cage and Left Behind.
You've not seen it,
I haven't seen it, but I read a couple reviews, and apparently it's horrible. But that's not surprising, because Christian movies of that kind are almost always horrible, like really consistently bad to the point where it's a bit of a joke. Like they're terrible, right?
Well,
and so you have these people who are like coming out of their little world that they've built for themselves and thinking that it's really good, thinking that it's really interesting, and thinking that it'll be exciting to people who aren't Christians, and then just falling flat on their faces with this bland, boring, sanctimonious nonsense about, good always winning over evil and stuff. And the rest of the culture's like, we've kind of moved on from this kind of one-dimensional nonsense. We can write complex characters and stories and anti-heroes, and we don't suddenly become devil worshippers just because we watch Breaking Bad or something.
Yeah.
Like, you can have complex ideas and characters and not become evil. But that seems to be the mindset of these kinds of things.
Yeah, I agree. It's like, unless you already espouse those religious views, I mean, it's like confirmation bias. If you're already a Christian and you watch a Christian movie, you're like, yeah, I believe in God. That reinforces what I already think. Great. In the same way that if I watched a documentary about how kick-ass atheism is, I'd be like, yeah, they're totally right. Woohoo. It doesn't matter how bad the documentary might be. Right?
Oh, it does matter. Come on. I've seen some pretty terrible ones.
Yeah, okay,
myself.
But you get my point.
Yeah, no, I get your point.
So the whole reason I brought any of this up is like when you see like that stupid Hobby Lobby case in the United States where the corporation has the right to not invest in or not cover contraception for their health plan because they believe that it's wrong, and they apparently now, according to the Supreme Court of the United States, corporations have a religious right to do this.
Sort of indirectly. I mean, it's implied that there's like it's representative of the views of the people who run the corporation, right?
Yeah, sure.
Which is kind of bad. I read a God, I can't. It was way back when like the case was first heard and sort of judged on, and basically there was a lawyer who just said that it was an odd thing for them to do, since it kind of creates the situation by which the corporation and the whole point of having a corporation is to protect the individuals who own it from basically harm, from either legal harm or financial harm, right? It's the corporation that owns the whatever, it's the corporation that's responsible. And basically what he said is, by making the corporation's religious views directly connected to the individuals who own it, you remove a lot of the legal foundation for making that separation of the corporation and the ownership.
Yeah, but now that a corporation can have religious rights, doesn't necessarily have to.
But don't forget, the Supreme Court did say this has no bearing on jurisprudence at all.
What is jurisprudence?
It's like it's not. It doesn't set a precedent.
Yeah. Okay.
They said it is not a precedent-setting case.
Well, you can't just say that. That's like saying this.
I know, because then everyone's like, well, okay, so, but if this is what the law says you can do, and this is your judgment of this complex issue, then like either the only reason it wouldn't be a precedent is if either there was some specific situation that only ever applies to this particular case, or you're wrong. Like, if you're wrong, then yeah, eventually this would just be overturned somehow, probably through the political process. Although, I mean, the president of the United States could just sign an executive order, but he's not going to do that. Or just some law or something that he could just do to ensure that everyone in the country has access to contraceptives. I mean, in our case, of course, we have a public healthcare system that kind of covers a lot of these sorts of things. So it's kind of a bit of an odd issue to me. Like, if for instance, as he seems to have thought, if it's important to have everyone in the United States be covered, right? and that seems to be the president's ostensible position, then just create a situation in which that can actually happen.
Instead of the sort of patchwork quilt
Of like, well, do it unless you don't feel like it. Because that's the whole problem, right? I mean, you make these kinds of bizarre compromises with what are in many cases the very religious people you were trying to negotiate with the day before. Suddenly they say, no, this isn't what we believe in, so we can't do it.
Well, yeah, religion is that sort of weird exemption of, human rights where you have food, water, shelter, and, religious freedom.
Yeah, everything else deals with physical and mental well-being, and then spiritual well-being is kind of kind of an odd addition. I mean, I understand the basic point, right? Like, this is
you don't want
religion. Religion is a
persecution.
fundamental fact of the majority of human history for the majority of people. Like, it has been there since before recorded history, right? So it's not something we can just brush off and be like, it doesn't fucking matter. Let's just get rid of it. Mm-hmm. It is important. It does matter. It is relevant. But in a modern context, when we're talking about things like actually providing housing, actually providing healthcare, actually doing stuff, how do you actually provide religion? Like, from a political standpoint, if you were looking at religion the same way you look at healthcare, what are you supposed to even do?
That is a really good question.
Because there's you don't build more churches because that's just a waste of time because there's already plenty of them, and in our case, a lot of them are going empty and closing, so there's not really much of a reason there. And the other problem is religion, unlike say healthcare, is not a fucking thing where it's just a matter of deciding the proper course of action and then taking it. Right. There is like a variety of sects, a variety of religions, some of which people believe in quite fervently, some of which are a bit vague and irrelevant to their daily lives. So you end up with like dozens of different churches in the same cities with no real clear distinction between which one is supposed to be the most important one for anyone to really judge.
No, that is true. It's
a mess.
It's a clusterfuck, yes. But going back to the Hobby Lobby case, I think that when it comes to the fact when a company, because of their self-proclaimed religious beliefs, are going to restrict access to contraceptives to their employees because that's what they want to do. Mm-hmm. That is when religious beliefs, which are supposed to be and should be respected because they're personal, that's when it crosses the line of affecting other people that don't hold those beliefs, right? Why should they have to pay for their own contraceptives because of the particular health plan that they're on, that if they worked for any other company it would be covered?
Probably, unless those people were religious as well.
Exactly. And so that's when it crosses the line from a private belief into a public issue.
You're acting purposely stupid here. You know damn well that religion is not a personal matter.
I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt.
No, but you know that it's not, and they know it too, and that's why they're making these arguments for their position. We both know, and everyone knows, that religion is not just something that happens in your head.
Yeah.
It's things people do, it's organizations, it's institutions, it's rules. There's a lot of other stuff to it, but that's sort of the basics. And because of that, this whole issue of just respect the individual, blah, 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 it doesn't make any fucking difference. It has no relationship to what religion actually is.
Which is a personal relationship between you and Jesus Christ.
Oh, piss off. Come on. It
is a farce. I'm just kidding.
That's a cop-out. But no, what I'm saying is that if you, particularly in the United States, these people who, sort of the more liberal Democratic Party type people who are arguing against this, are using incredibly bad reasoning to try to defend what is something that is essentially antithetical to their own fucking philosophy. The whole point of providing people with contraceptives has nothing to do with individual rights.
It's a public
It's
health.
a social issue that has to do with social health and well-being.
It's better for society if we have less sexually transmitted diseases.
It's kind of like,
it turns out,
when you start talking about like crime and punishment, and that's another big thing that religion really likes, apparently, particularly right-wing religions.
What, punishing
Putting
like,
people in jail for a very long time for immoral acts.
and killing them whenever
well,
they
and
think
yeah,
it's
on occasion,
right?
sure. Whereas the alternative position is, whatever punishment is done on the basis of whatever benefit it has to society as a whole.
Yeah.
We don't punish people just so we can say we did, and those guys got theirs in the end. It's to make society better and safer and healthier. It's not to just fuck some asshole over that you don't like.
Yeah, and sure, everyone loves to do that, but the whole point of the judicial system and the criminal justice system is to make society safer as a whole. So you do whatever makes society more safe as a whole, not what makes you feel the best. I think
Yeah.
in the United States, in terms of the death penalty, and I might add it as a side note, Canada is deeply split on the issue of the death penalty. I mean, it's never going to get fucking reinstated, but it's about 50-50. But
I understand that. I mean, it makes sense. People would look at certain crimes and say, yes, that those are things I believe people should be killed for.
yeah, and don't get me wrong, there have been people that have committed certain crimes that I would,
Well, also
would to see them put in front of a
we
firing
also
squad
we also
over,
technically
but-
don't have life imprisonment either.
Well,
I mean, we have life imprisonment, but that's 25 years.
25 years, yeah.
Sort of.
Well,
Which is, I mean, it's like a lifetime, but it's not until you die.
yeah. But there are enough people that are falsely accused of murder that we end up executing all these innocent people, or the United States does, rather, in particular Texas. And that's precisely why we don't do that anymore, is because all these... You don't want to murder innocent people ever, right? And so you just sort of have to err on the side of caution. And while, yeah, in some cases the death penalty might seem appropriate, but at the same time, no civil fucking society murders its own citizens. Period. I don't care what else you have to say about that. But in any event, we should probably go back to religion.
Well, this is sort of dealing with it. I mean, a lot of religion in politics is about crime and punishment and who deserves to get what and when.
Yeah, reefer madness and all that.
Yeah, that kind of attitude of like there are moral and immoral people, and the immoral people should be locked away forever and ever to keep them away from the good and pure and
Because,
decent.
yeah, you just quarter them off. They don't exist. Out of sight, out of mind.
Well, yeah, I mean, not only does that apply to prisoners, it could apply to homosexuals or whatever group in society you find somewhat objectionable. It's like, well, just make them disappear, either in my own mind or on the streets. Just not have them there, please.
I was locked up for wearing nylon and polyester. No.
Well, sure, that is a rule, right?
It is in the Bible.
Yeah, okay. I mean, like, there's the well-known ones, right? Like the lobster and things like that. So
Hold on. I should specify.
the Bible.
Well, the Bible, at the time of writing the Bible, they didn't have synthetic materials like polyester. So.
Surely, if
But it's mixed
Yes.
materials.
but
right?
if it was written by a being capable of knowing the future, then that shouldn't be an issue.
Surely he foresaw this coming travesty.
This very question you'd be asking this very day, and so therefore would have tailored the rules to fit all of human history. I mean, that would be quite the miracle in and of itself, which gets into the whole thing of the Ten Commandments as like fundamental to legal and political thought.
And how there are like politicians in the states that insist of having the Ten Commandments up in their legislature.
Sure, not just politics. I mean, we have a few here. I mean, usually it's a bit more oblique, the way they're appealed to, like fundamental principles or the moral issues that we all agree on historically. Those kinds of ideas of like there's these specific rules that we all have always believed in, and to deviate from this like core set of rules is wrong.
Yes, to have no other gods before me. That is.
Well, to be fair,
Is that one of the Ten Commandments?
it's the first of the Ten Commandments.
I thought the first five were like the more important ones.
No, the
Like murdering and stuff.
no murdering is like 4 or 6 or something, and then somewhere after that's theft of property, such as oxen or women. There's they kind of get on. They like the ones you'd actually consider to be even remotely related to moral issues, the murder and theft thing, are like down on the list. The first like 5 are just repetitions of there's one God, worship me properly, worship me the way I want to be worshipped.
Not
that
exactly
kind of thing.
something that you'd probably want in a public legislature.
Well, some people seem to think so. I mean,
Yeah.
they seem to be appealing to it. Although, of course, in the Bible, there's 2 different versions of the 10 Commandments, and neither one of them have 10 commandments. But it doesn't matter.
You know, like what I was saying before, like a while back about
Well, one of them does.
like religious groups sort of being at odds with like modern society's moralism and you know, the fact that they've lost court case after court case after court case about gay marriage and you know like creationism and evolution in schools. There has been a sort of refocus of the evangelists Protestant movement in the United States towards Africa because
Right.
for many decades religious charity groups have been focusing their efforts of course on feeding the African population.
Good thing to do.
Oh yeah, I mean I support doing helping others and doing charity work, that's great.
And if you're Christian and you feel obliged to say that this is a Christian charity for whatever reason, then fine.
Okay, sure.
I'm willing to,
As long as you're handing out food with your Bibles, then that's fine.
What if it's inserted between each page, so they have to
So you have to read it?
at least glance at the pages while they're reading?
Sure, whatever.
Fine.
But a lot of the really sort of the most reactionary and conservative religious elements that feel the most frustrated with the secular immoralism of modern society have gone to Africa and Uganda especially. And people might have heard in the news recently about the sort of witch hunt for homosexuals in Uganda. The publishing in major newspapers of names and phone numbers and home addresses of supposedly gay homosexual offenders. Jesus, there was on the front page of one of the major Ugandan newspapers, it said "Hang the Gays" as the title. Like, it's a frightening and disgusting reality that LGBT people have to face there. And guess what? This is a direct result of the quote-unquote work that religious quote-unquote charities have done in Uganda. Like, they have fucking condom burning ceremonies because they believe in abstinence so much. And here's a country
the fumes from that must be terrible. I mean, never mind the latex, but like the spermicide and the
I know. And this is lest I remind anyone that Africa of course has this AIDS pandemic. And of all places that you could possibly think to have a condom burning ceremony, I mean, give me a fucking break. But
I can't really think of a place, maybe other than Vatican City, where a condom burning ceremony would make sense.
Yeah,
and even then, I mean, with all the child molestation, maybe it wouldn't even be a good idea in Vatican City.
No, they try to probably stray from that issue as much as possible. But no, I mean, Christian imperialists, cultural imperialists in Africa are making their mark on like modern day politics, and everyday homosexual people in those countries have to deal with persecution because of these, reactionary ideas that some people have. And it's awful that they have to live in terror and fear like this, but this is, I think, where religion and politics cross head on head.
Yeah, we're
this is the
religious ideas and the sort of the power of politics kind of are able to most effectively use each other.
On the other hand, there have been some very progressive religious governments. There was the whole movement throughout the 1980s of, there were Catholic church groups under the banner of liberation theology, were working together with political movements to free their countries of dictators and increase access to social programs and all that good stuff that all us lefties like. So, I don't want to characterize religion's involvement in politics as just inherently poisonous necessarily. So there have been some good examples of that in the past. And there are a lot of, church groups that could do charity work and all that sort of thing.
Well, there is a real and sincere trend in religion to try to help people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that does express itself in left-wing politics. So there is a real connection there. But it is still the fact that religion at least seems best able to express itself in conservative and therefore right-wing political parties.
Yeah, that's one thing that I've never really been able to wrap my head around.
Because, religion is extremely varied, right?
Yeah.
And yet, there doesn't seem to be that kind of influence on left-wing politics.
Yeah. One thing that I've never been able to quite figure out about religion and politics, though, is that very thing about it being associated with the right wing. Because religion to me seems, you can cherry pick the Bible and take whatever you want from it, but I always thought the whole attitude of, treating your neighbor as, your own brother or whatever, and helping out the needy, these things to me seem like sort of more socialist left-wing principles, sharing the wealth,
community, communalism, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I get it. I don't know why it's not. I don't know why it's not more important in left-wing politics. I'm not personally religious at all, so it's sort of a non-issue for me. Well, this might all just derive from the fact that religion tends to focus on moral issues and not material ones, whereas a lot of left-wing politics is about benefiting people socially and not so much like an individual's sense of self-worth or their, quote, like, position in the universe.
Yeah. I don't know. If you listen to Glenn Beck, he puts an awful lot of focus on charity and helping other people. But as long as it doesn't involve the government and anyone's collective responsibility, then it's okay. But
does he not know how charities work? They're not like literally telling people to go out into some country somewhere and hand out money in person, right?
No.
Does he not understand the distinction there? Yep. But I think the basic point again is just that these are charities that are focused on moral issues, not religious ones. I think that when they look at some country and see a bunch of poor people desperate for help, they see a opportunity to proselytize and nothing else. Fundamentally, yes, sure, helping people to be educated and be well fed and housed and all that stuff is great, but ironically enough, and I think there's at the very least some kind of implicit understanding of this, but that when you provide those basic things for people, they're less likely to find religion appealing.
That tends to be how it goes. Like the countries that are the more well off are the more secular ones.
So these religious charities will benefit if they maintain a poverty level, not lower it, not improve people's lives, but just sort of keep them in a situation where they're dependent upon these religious ideas for everything.
That could be true, but I think we would be giving them way too much credit for figuring that out.
This doesn't have to be some kind of conscious decision on their part. Charities have been working for a very long time, and it's entirely possible that they've just sort of organically evolved to this equilibrium where they are most successful in those countries where they do the least good.
Okay.
Material good.
I guess the point of what we're saying with regards to our topic, though, is really that there is just a shift towards moral issues.
For why that's the case. If you believe that abortion is in fact murder, then the issue is, by that measurement, more significant
Yeah, okay.
on its own.
Yeah, but
And if you believe that God wants you to do what you can to stop these innocent lives from being murdered, then it's even more important than that. It's possibly even your life's work to
Yeah.
stop people.
okay, but let's take it down a notch from the most extreme example, and we're calling it murder. What about just contraception? Why do you have representatives of the religious organizations testifying to the Supreme Court in the United States about access to contraception instead of unemployment? Like, if you actually look at the Bible, it talks about helping the needy.
If you look at the Bible,
As if
if
I've
there
ever-
hasn't been a phrase that is completely more meaningless than that.
Especially because I've never read it.
You probably read it.
No, I've
some
never
of it.
read it. No.
Browsed it?
I'm not even gonna lie.
Cur-
I haven't read.
Seen it in a bookstore.
Sure, maybe first 2 pages, but it's unreadable.
The first line. You can probably say, can you? First line of the Bible.
In the beginning, God created something. Shit.
Yes, good enough. That's good enough to be a Christian at least. I mean, you don't actually have to read the damn thing.
Okay, but the point is, I think that if I was going to look at things from a strictly religious perspective, I think, and this is obviously my own bias, but I would think that I would look at the pandemic of unemployment and problems with underemployment and labor rights and stuff and people being mistreated as affecting the well-being of people more than whether or not people can use condoms or not.
I
just
get
don't-
your point.
I don't
you don't
really-
see the connection there. Well, what I'm saying is that you don't see the connection because you don't believe that there is a being or that there is such an importance placed on those issues. The whole problem I have with religion isn't even so much like the specific things that are decided that are important. It's this whole attitude of short-circuiting people's reason for the sake of a simple answer. Of just taking something and saying, well, this is what God tells you to do, so this is how you need to act, this is how you need to vote, this is the issues you need to care about, because this is what God just tells you to care about. You don't have to understand it, you don't have to think about it, you don't have to comprehend it, just do it. And that whole attitude, I find just completely objectionable, whether or not the end result is something kind of generally good or bad.
You just answered the question that I posed earlier.
Yeah?
Why religion is so closely associated with right-wing politics.
Well, come on. They probably say otherwise, but it's hard to tell sometimes.
Well, and I also, given the fact that we have done an entire episode on libertarianism, I don't want to group all right-wing politics with religious conservatives because
Some of them do try to.
There is a distinction to be made.
They do try to dig
So-
themselves out from under that mess.
So any libertarians
Particularly in the
listening
United
to this,
States, right?
I didn't mean you.
I mean, they do. There are right wingers in the United States who are trying to sort of distance themselves from like religious conservatives.
They're
Although, ironically, by doing that, they undermine their own ability to actually enact the laws they want, which I assume is the whole reason why the right wing in the United States has been so friendly towards the religious movement in the United States generally, that they see it as an easy get for them, that this is a whole block of voters that they can basically lock into their own party and never have to worry about losing, so long as they pander to them.
That's really interesting. I mean, in Canada, is religion on the rise in the States? Would you say, do the
Not really. I mean, I don't think so. I mean, it's like intensity, right? So you can have a smaller group of people who are louder and making a bigger influence. I think that in the case of Canada, we have a perfect example of what the Republican Party could be doing if they hadn't basically relied on religion for so long. I think the problem for them is that they have basically painted themselves into a corner where they can't easily find a way out because they have just sort of kept doubling down on the religious nonsense. Instead of the Conservative Party, which has sort of been saying, to their more religious people, you could vote for another party, but we're the only ones that you will ever have a hope in hell of influencing. So you're going to have to just vote for us anyway. So too bad if we don't, today we don't care about you or tell you to shut up. You'll have to vote for the Conservatives anyhow. What are you going to do? Vote Liberal? Come on, you're not going to do that. So
me, that
the same argument could be made by the Republican Party to the religious people in the States, where they could just say, look, these issues are not going to be dealt with today. May not be dealt with by us at any time soon, but you're still going to have to vote for us because you're definitely not going to vote Democrat.
But the right-wing religious element in the United States politics has made such an impact on the discourse of issues that's
but only because they've been allowed to, because it's such an easy argument. It narrows all of the discussion down to just these talking points that don't matter at all, where you have people who have like a hair's breadth of difference between them being able to argue about nothing.
Yeah, they are very good at that at Fox News.
So you can just do that, and so like the Republican Party's leadership races and whatever are just pointless. Like there is no difference. They're all Christian, although Mitt Romney wasn't.
Apparently.
But that's kind of like weird, where you have a good example of money trumping religious convictions.
Yeah, that is
like
the
he's
example.
not he's Mormon, right? He's not the proper. He's not really Christian at all. I mean, it is a different, distinct religion. Right?
It's like the evangelist Christians of the United States voted for Mitt Romney for the same reasons that most people use Windows. They don't like it at all, but they just felt like they had no choice.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of that in politics, that whole attitude. And I mean, particularly in the United States, where you have only two political parties that are really allowed.
Yeah, that does suck for them.
I mean, the whole idea that there is actually any kind of choice there at all is pretty silly.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't get to choose the leader. You get two people to choose from, and then it apparently seems that it doesn't even matter who you vote for, because they'll just go through the fucking sausage machine that is the American political system until they're just this unrecognizable mess, which is sort of what happened to Barack Obama.
Sort of.
I mean, he's still able to give a pretty punchy speech when he wants to.
Okay, enough about American politics. I'm fucking tired of American politics. Okay, so
The world is tired of American politics.
Canadian politics. The one thing that we haven't brought up yet is the fact that in Canada we have public schools that are religiously motivated.
Yeah, this is a major...
And funded by the government.
Just generally, it's a major difference between the United States and Canada that we don't have separation of church and state.
We have it traditionally, but not actually in law.
Well, and not even traditionally in certain explicit cases. What we have is we have public funding for religious schools for Protestant and Catholic denominations as a precondition to Confederation. It was one of the sort of compromises that were made when the country was founded.
Sure, but there are also private schools, say in BC, for instance, that get public funding.
They get public funding because they provide a public service, which is educating people.
Yeah, but they're paying for it. It's supposed to be private.
No, it's because it's a public service. It's much in the same way as in the United States, where they have private hospitals that are publicly funded. The money, there's a lot of money that is provided to those hospitals from the federal government in order to provide those basic services that have to be there in order to ensure that people don't just get thrown out.
With the exception of introducing a third party, can you think of a possibly more inefficient system than some mangled mess between public and private?
I don't know.
Just for the sake of what?
Yeah, it is a bit of a mess, and when it comes to schools, it's even sillier because right now there's been a series of debates about this, just of whether or not we should still have these essentially archaic schools existing. They're not really all that significant. They don't teach curriculums that are all that different, although they are allowed to teach religious stuff as well, but they still have to conform to provincial education guidelines, and since they're primarily in Ontario and Quebec, those guidelines are fairly, normal.
If you want to have a private school that's privately funded, and you want to make that religious, that's fine.
Really? Is it? Would you really say that? Do you really believe that it's okay to take innocent minds, malleable minds, and put them in a private religious school? Do you really think that's a fine thing to do?
I do not think that's a fine thing to do.
I knew it.
But I couldn't possibly, in good conscience, argue against that.
Well, I can argue against it for the exact same reason I would argue against teaching creationism in public schools. Not because it's religious, but because it's fucking wrong.
Okay. If you have enough money and can send your kid to school and do that, you could teach them whatever you want under capitalism. How about that?
Well, yes, but you can do that anyway. That's not much of a statement. That's like, what people do right now anyhow. I'm not really sure what the point is there.
I'm just trying not to sound judgmental, that's
You
all.
can be judgmental. I mean, if you say, like, private schools are bad because they don't teach a proper curriculum.
Yeah, okay, done.
Like there.
I agree with that.
To the extent that they don't do that, to the extent that they include things that are illogical or inaccurate or present people with a worldview that is ultimately harmful to them, yeah, you can just say, I'm against it.
I myself might agree with the concept of the flying spaghetti monster, but if they started teaching the flying spaghetti monster in schools, then I would myself object.
That would be interesting.
Yeah, I sure would.
They might have to.
As a critical thinking course. Is this real?
No. You know how in God, where was it? It was it was some place in the States where they had to allow Satanists to allow their stupid services on public property or whatever, because they allowed Christian ones, and so they had to just allow everyone's or something. Yeah. No, it was actually in schools, right? It was basically they allowed religious services in schools in this particular region. I can't even remember.
I know.
What it was.
I think I remember the one you mean. There was a Christian school group.
Yeah.
Like a club at school.
Yeah, it was a club. That's it. It was a club.
And there was, and to sort of take the piss.
Yeah.
There were some kids that were annoyed by them, so they made a Satanist group,
that
and
must
so
have been
the
it.
school had to allow them because on equal religious grounds.
Yeah, well, that's the problem, right? I mean, so you could actually have someone who demands the flying spaghetti monster be taught alongside creationism.
Well, that was
which
the
was
whole
originally point. Yeah, no, but I mean, I think that they might be willing to give that away. They might be willing to say, you know what, we are going to allow that. We're going to just allow, it's just going to be biology. That's the entire year's work for every year. It's just going to be all biology, just every single version of it, of every single religion that bothers to fill in a form. And then we just have the teacher who's Christian just only preference the Christian version. It does seem like at times that's really what their end goal is here. Because they know they can't really argue for creationism as non-religious, because they've tried that over and over again in the States and to some degree throughout the world.
Intelligent design,
whatever the hell you call it. The problem is it's so influenced and inextricably intertwined with religion that you can't really avoid it. So it seems like at this point they almost might just as well abandon the whole distinction and just say, yeah, it's religious, but we don't need to make a preference towards it because we'll allow any argument in.
Yeah, but once you allow any argument in, then you allow arguments from people like you and me, Mac.
Sure, but that's just the evolutionist position. I mean, I just defer to people who actually have, knowledge in that field. I'm not going to present my version of evolution because it would be really simplistic and stupid. The other thing though is we talk about creationism and evolution and abortion, gay rights. What interests me about religion and politics is how issue-based they have become, and how the the ideas, the principles have been completely abandoned. Like, it's just these issues that seem to matter and nothing else.
It's funny because the religion is very broad. It
Yeah.
claims to sort of address everything. Your
Well,
spiritual,
it's
your
about
happiness
morality,
and all
it's
that.
about improving people, it's about...
But then the
about showing them
political
how-
issues that you are supposed to care about is like this one, and this one. But that's it.
Yeah, just that the focus on these issues we've sort of addressed here are just so prevalent that I think it is what ultimately will undermine religion's influence in politics. That as they lose battle after battle, and as they don't have a coherent philosophy to fall back on to try to sort of, rally their forces and defend themselves, that they won't be able to effectively meet any kind of, really just meet the future as it happens. Like, the modern world is just moving on without them.